It turns out when you have a couple decades worth of coaching experience like Bret Bielema does, you tend to learn a thing or two about that profession. Locked On Illini, let's go.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Simple reminder, we are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Sunny Verma. You can find me at IlliniCast. You can find me at the Sunny V. And like Mike Vega did, you can find me on Instagram. Mike, on early Monday morning, sent me this message. I'm from the south suburbs of Chicago and graduated from U of I in 1994. I now live on the Space Coast and work at the Kennedy Space Center. I really enjoy the show and all of the great behind-the-scenes info. It's become my primary source of Illini sports info. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Mike. Talk about making a guy's day. I was getting my daughter ready for school, and to get that sort of message, that really sets the tone for the rest of the day. So please find me on Instagram, Facebook. Let me know your feedback. It doesn't have to be positive like Mike's was. It could be negative. Let me know if there's something you want me to improve on. But you don't have to be like Mike and send me a message. If you want to simply support the show, please just hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. It helps this show grow immensely, and it doesn't cost you anything. We're up to 1,100 subs. We've more than doubled our subs on the audio daily side, which is incredible. And I'm attributing that to college football season starting. And so it's nice to finally find this new audience that does enjoy the college football content that I'm trying to provide. We got a fun one for you. The episode's brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Okay, we're going to kickstart the show talking about, obviously, the Kansas-Illinois game. It's the story from Saturday. Illinois comes back from being down with a victory over the then number 19 Kansas Jayhawks. I was able to finally watch that game. I've watched it 3 full times now, so I feel a lot more comfortable giving the feedback and analysis over today and tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a positional grades episode, so if you're into that sort of thing, please definitely tune in tomorrow. But today, I wanted to give the flowers to 2 guys who I think absolutely deserve them. And obviously, the topic is what I started the show off by saying. Bret Bielema knows a thing or two about coaching. 2 years ago, the Illinois Fighting Illini had, I'm just going to say, inarguably, the best defense in all of college football, led by guys like Johnny Newton, Devin Witherspoon, Quan Martin, Sidney Brown. The Illini started off the season 7-1 in a very dominant fashion, and it looked like the Illini at that point were on a trajectory on its way up under the leadership of Bret Bielema and Ryan Walters. Well, we all know the story. Ryan Walters, in the offseason, was hired by rival Purdue to become their head coach. Then Bret Bielema had a decision ahead of him. Who is he going to decide to hire as his defensive coordinator? Many expected Kevin Kane, but ultimately, Bret decided to give the job to Aaron Henry, a former player of his from Wisconsin, a former coach of his from Arkansas. Aaron was seen as a dynamic young personality, an up-and-coming coach who was a fantastic recruiter, at least on the secondary side. So it wasn't a complete shocker, but it was somewhat of an upset. And Kane ended up following Ryan Walters to take the defensive coordinator spot out at Purdue. And the first-year results for Aaron Henry were very bleak. Not great at all. And he's the first one that would tell you that. You got the first glimpse of that in the first game of last year, where we barely squeaked by a MAC team, the Toledo Rockets. And then you really saw how bad things were in game 2, when it was these very Kansas Jayhawks who really put a beatdown on the Illini on prime time. At the end of 3 quarters, that score was 34-7. It ended up being a little bit more respectable, 34-23, but those of us who watched know how much of a bloodbath that was. The defense got a little bit better throughout the year, but it was a clear weakness coming into this season. A lot of us, raise your hand, when you were asked what part of the team you were most worried about coming into this year, a lot of you would have said the defensive side. We have a lot of talent on the offensive side of football, but the guys in our secondary seemed a little green. Our defensive line seems to have a high floor, but not really any stars. It was just our linebackers that seems to have some quality, potential all Big Ten players. But the question started with the leadership. Was Aaron Henry ready to be a defensive coordinator? Or was this a bad hire by Bret? Was Aaron not quite ready yet? Now, 2 games in, it's still, of course, too early to ultimately make that decision. But after watching this Kansas game, as someone who has talked about how he wanted improvement, I have to give him credit when I see the improvement. Everyone thought that Kansas versus Illinois was going to easily hit the over, was going to be a high-scoring affair with 2 fantastic defenses going up against ho-hum defenses. But that's not what happened. The Illinois, in week 1, shut out Eastern Illinois, scoring 0 points. Of course, that's an FCS team. But Illinois against Kansas also played very well on the defensive side of the football. The stuff that we saw happen in last year's game, where it seemingly every time Kansas had the football, some Kansas wide receiver would get wide open and score a 30, 40, 70-yard touchdown. It didn't happen this past Saturday. The defensive backs were the stars of the show. And guess who coaches that secondary? It's Aaron Henry. Aaron Henry, our defensive line, sure, for the second straight game, didn't show much in the box score, but you can kind of see what the plan was. The plan was to make sure you don't let Jalen Daniels beat you with his legs. And if that means that you don't over pursue so that he can't get past you, that's exactly what you're going to do. And that's exactly what they did. And guess what? Jalen could not beat you with his arm, at least not on Saturday. It was a brilliant game plan by Aaron Henry. Aaron has really coached up these guys. I mean, Illinois has 8 takeaways after the first 2 games. We had 15 all of last year. And that 8 that I just referenced, that's tops in the entire country. That comes from leadership. If I'm going to blame Aaron Henry last year, then I'm going to give him his credit this year. A lot of people wanted him gone. A lot of people asked Bret about him, but Bret never wavered in his confidence. Bret always said, I believe a direct quote was something along the lines of, I made my biggest leap as a coach from year 1 to year 2. And he was basically insinuating that that's exactly what he pictured Aaron Henry doing. And so far, 2 games in, Bret was right. Maybe it's time we stop doubting Bret Bielema. Hey, Locked On Illini fans. I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college program today. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Illini? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships. You'll control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of the football season, but will determine the shape and the future of your program. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go, as you want, and when you want. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Illini fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. You come to Locked On Illini because you know you're going to get everyday coverage of our beloved, but you also know, at least my everydayers know, that when it's Tuesday, we get some overall Big Ten coverage thanks to my friend Ted from the Big Ten Ted YouTube show. Ted, thanks for coming back on.
Hey, it's great to be here. It's great to be here. And I can, we may be pretty far away as far as the internet is concerned, but I can sense the positive vibes that are kind of coming off of the Illini Nation and certainly existing here on the show. Big win for the orange and blue in front of a sellout crowd on Saturday night.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not trying to influence you because I genuinely want to hear your take on the game. I'm sure you've had a chance to watch it at this point. We talked about the game a little bit last week. We made our predictions, but now I'm curious now. We know what Illini Nation, what the vibes are amongst us. But outside Champaign, with more national guys like you, what are your thoughts on Illinois football?
Just don't ever doubt Bret Bielema, right? He's always going to have the last laugh, right? It's just I feel, there were people that doubted in terms of preseason predictions how many games they were going to win. Doubted Illinois a lot more than I did, right? I had a 6-6 record. I saw, some 5ers. I saw some 4. Did I see a 3 win in there somewhere? Maybe.
There was actually there was a 2 win.
There was a 2 win. Okay, yeah, that was utterly ridiculous. I'll just go out there and say that right now for Illinois. But man, you saw that defense come alive, specifically that secondary. Such an opportunistic approach. And Xavier Scott, man, he may have single-handedly maybe won that football game with a pick 6 and another interception, the sack, and 8 tackles, right, as well. Boy, playing all over the football field as well. And all of a sudden, if this defense kind of gets on track and you combine it with an offense, now there were some positives and negatives maybe to the offense in that game versus Kansas, but this is an Illinois team. Once you get past that group of maybe 5 teams, 6 teams towards the top, I think you got to start maybe putting Illinois into that category with the Iowas and the Washingtons and teams like that of the world right now in the Big Ten. I love what I'm seeing, and I think after this game, one of the things, if I'm an Illini fan, that gets me optimistic is I don't think that was an ultra great game, right? Caden Fagan did not have the explosive or great game that I thought that he would have against the Jayhawks. And, but Pat Bryant, I think, is really the first 2 games I've been really impressed with Pat Bryant, because I think we talked that there might be, we were glad that Zachary Franklin was brought in because I don't know if Pat Bryant is that wide receiver 1 type of guy, but he's proving that, you put him on the other side of Zachary Franklin, he can still put up some really good production. That's, I think, the most positive. This is a big win in front of a sellout crowd in a primetime atmosphere against a good top 20 football team. That's great, but I think this team is going to continue to get better and better and better. And it's the mark of a Bret Bielema team, right? He develops talent maybe better than anybody in this conference. So this is a big win, certainly for the conference. It's a big win, of course, for Illinois as well. And I'm really excited to see what they can do and how they can really build the momentum off of this, because as we know, middle of the schedule, they got some pretty big games.
I think it's if we went on Saturday against Central Michigan, it's like the first time we've started the season 3-0 in like 20 plus years, which seems ridiculous, but that just tells you kind of where Illinois football is coming from. And keep in mind, obviously if we do go 3-0, you're setting up that big Friday night primetime showdown with the Nebraska Huskers with, those of you who watch me on Big Ten Show, my co-host Justin Adams, we're going to have a little fun with that particular game. But, I talked about this on yesterday's episode. All the attention is going to be on Nebraska. And quite honestly, Ted, that's how I want it. I feel like I kind of want the pressure, the lights to be shining on the Huskers, because this Illinois team seems to be okay. There's like a subtle confidence to this team. Like, hey, we know we're good. People have forgotten about us. There's a couple new head coaches who've entered the conference and, they're recruiting really well or they're talking a big game. Bret's kind of become old news. But as you said, Bret knows what he's doing. And he's raised the floor of this program considerably. And even when the outside may not be that confident, I think that locker room is ready to show the rest of the conference that Illinois is on its way up.
Yeah, that Friday night game is very interesting. Not that this is what we care about or what's important, but if you are a Fox TV executive sitting there and you had an unranked Nebraska to start the season, you had an unranked Illinois team to start the season, and all of a sudden Nebraska pulled off, Nebraska pulled off a really big win against Colorado. Now they're ranked, and you got an Illinois team that's going to be ranked. That makes for a pretty good Friday night matchup that I think a lot of people nationally are going to be interested in. And, when I looked at Nebraska's schedule, say, hey, if they can get past Colorado, there's a group of 4 games against maybe not super upper echelon teams in the Big Ten. Illinois is being one of those games. And I think they're very fortunate that this game is going to be in Lincoln. If this game was at Memorial Stadium, considering, now I know Nebraska's coming off a big win as well, but considering the momentum that Illinois is gathering, I think that this one could be a lot closer. And it still, I think, could be a very close game, but maybe it would shift to the side of the Illinois Fighting Illini. I think that will most likely be, Rutgers you could probably throw in there, but that will most likely be the toughest test in that 4 games for Nebraska, and they get them right away. That is a very, very intriguing matchup to me, because you've got an opportunistic defense for Illinois. Dylan Raiola, he has protected the football. That's one thing that he has done well that, people last year at Nebraska did not do well. So that's very important. That's why they're having the success that they are just a couple of games into the season. But it's going to happen. Okay, it's going to happen at some point. Which game is it going to happen in? Can Illinois and Xavier Scott have a very similar performance like they did against Kansas? Oh, boy, that could make that game really interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that and previewing that game with you next week, Ted. But let's talk about, Illinois is one of the positive stories of the conference. There's a couple other teams in the conference who haven't gone off to exactly a great start, including one which you were very high on, it seemed like, coming into from the preseason, the Oregon Ducks. What's going on out there?
Yeah, Oregon's had an injury up on their offensive line. Matthew Bedford, a transfer coming in. They were expecting to really plug into a starting role, and they've had to do some shuffling. And I talked about this on my Monday edition of Big Nation. It's, you have an injury and pass protection. It's not just a couple of guys, right? It's a 5, 6, 7-man effort, certainly up there. But I think the thing that surprised me, right, allowing 7 sacks in their first 2 games, right? This was an offensive line that allowed the least amount of sacks in college football last season. I forgot just how many it was, but it was less than 7 the entire year last year protecting Bo Nix. They've got 2 really good NFL caliber tackles in Josh Connerly and Ajani Cornelius. And you have guys that are coming off the edge and winning those battles. So, you can talk about the combination of the offensive line, and that might have something to do with it, but there might be a little bit of a bigger issue. Now, the good thing about Oregon is Will Stein implements a quick passing type of scheme. It doesn't, yes, they do certainly fire the ball deep down the field with some of these speed and weapons that they have on the outside. But, this is an offense that likes to get rid of the football quickly, get it to their athletes in space. So if their offensive line continues to have these issues, even when Matthew Bedford is able to come back, they're going to need to implement a lot quicker passing concepts to be able to maybe neutralize what they have up front. And then I'm curious to see how the run game is going to be with a guy like Jordan James in the backfield. So I trust the creativity of Will Stein, but man, they had to fight tooth and nail to be Idaho State champs, man, to beat the Vandals and the Broncos in their first 2 games. And they got a game coming up. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later on against the Beavs on the road. We'll just talk about that later on because that's tricky. That can be maybe a little bit tricky considering how the season has gone for the Ducks.
Another team that a lot of people, I guess it was 50-50 on how they were going to fare this year. Losing to Texas is not something to be shameful about. It genuinely looks like Texas might be, if not the best team in the country, one of the top 2 best teams in the nation here. But the manner of which the Michigan Wolverines have played in their first 2 weeks to kick off this season has a lot of Wolverines fans worried. Are you?
Worried, just how worried maybe am I? If they were that, because a lot of people had them preseason as a fringe playoff team. Some people had them 10th or 11th, the seeding after the group of 5 team sliding in there at number 12. Some of them had them at the first 3 out or the first 4 out, something like that. If that's truly where Michigan was, the disparity. Now, I know Texas, they're an elite team. They can win a national championship. They've got great players all over. No question about it. But I feel like if Michigan was that fringe playoff team right now, they would have played a lot better against a team like Texas. Now, the season is not over, but here's the thing. They need to find their identity. Their identity is offensive lines that can move guys up front, is a great running game with great backs. You know, it's the story of Donovan Edwards when we're all said and done at Michigan is going to be, boy, a very intriguing story to tell, because even last season, right, he has stepped up last season, you know, maybe lagging behind a little bit and, you know, throughout his career, maybe not living up to those high recruiting expectations that he had as a high profile player. But man, does he step up in the big games. Ohio State game on the road, the national championship against Washington. And then you look at these first two games and, you know, there were some rumblings coming out of camp that Kaleo Mullins could take over as RB1. And you're kind of seeing it play out right now on the football field. And, you know, with all due respect to Kaleo Mullins, okay, if he's your number one back, you know, you're going to be fine in the run game. You're not going to be like you were the past few years. So you got to find that smash identity that Sharon Moore has talked about. Because if you don't have it, J.J. McCarthy can't save you by continuously converting on 3rd and 8, on 3rd and 9. You got a passing game in Davis Warren that's limited to 10 yards, 12 yards away from the line of scrimmage. And Colston Loveland was a little bit suspect even in this Texas game with some drops and some fumbles and things like that. So they got a lot of work to do, but they got to find out who they are against Arkansas State this week, because the USC Trojans are coming to town. Yeah. And they're not messing around right now. USC looks like they're I don't care what the AP poll says. They are a top 10 football team. That is going to be a challenge. Who had this on their bingo card, Sunny, at the beginning of the year? That is going to be a challenge for Michigan at the line of scrimmage against the Trojans. Right now, I know that's multiple weeks away, like that Nebraska-Illinois game, but right now, I think USC is better in the trenches than the Michigan Wolverines. And you wouldn't have caught me dead saying that last year. So, and Michigan, you look at them on the defensive side of the football, man, they got to ramp up this pressure. All we heard on the offseason was Wink Martindale is going to blitz, and blitz again. Now, Texas had great pass protection. They did a really good job reading the things that Michigan wanted to do up front, the things that how they wanted to confuse Texas up front. It didn't work. But, man, they got to get after it because they're supposed to have this great defensive line. I want to see them get after the quarterback. So there's certainly some things to work on. But if they can capture that identity, once again, I think this is a team that could respond. But they got USC on the schedule. They got Oregon on the schedule. They got Ohio State on the schedule. Your Illini could be an interesting matchup. Washington on the road. Washington's been looking good so far. So they got to get things corrected, and they got to get it corrected quick, I believe, because there's no breaks once we get to the Big Ten schedule.
Just remember, Ted, my bold prediction this year was an upset special for the Illini.
That's true.
100-year anniversary game. All right, Ted, we're going to take a peek into the prominent Week 3 matchups right after this. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you have a long list to do for work or a list of DIY projects to tackle at home, take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects for the home. When you get your supplies for your project, do not forget the most essential supply, which is a 5 Hour Energy shot. With 0 sugar and a convenient portable size, it's a perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone. Try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You choose the flavor and get it delivered directly to your house. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only available until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, Ted. So week 3 coming up, and I will forgive you if you don't have Illinois and Central Michigan as one of the prominent games that you're going to be focusing on. So the floor is yours. Let us know, let the listeners know which games to be paying attention to this weekend.
Oh, Alabama, Wisconsin. Oh boy, Wisconsin. Let's start first with this. They have played 2 4-quarter tough games against Western Michigan and against South Dakota. And here's the thing about the game against South Dakota. When I saw what I saw from this team against Western Michigan, my score prediction was 27-17 Badgers. And but South Dakota was a top 10 team. They were ranked 6th, in the FCS at this time. They were actually a preseason top 5, and they fell down one spot. And I looked at South Dakota. That was a tough team up front. And I'm like, you looked at Wisconsin, what they had on the defensive line, you'd think that they could be pushed around a little bit. And that's exactly what happened. There's been some people in Badger country that have said, well, they're holding a lot of things back for this game against Alabama. Look, there are teams that hold things back all the time, and they don't get pushed to a trailing in the 4th quarter against a MAC team. Okay, that just doesn't happen. Right? If you're a good football team and you have talent, you can kind of get over that hump and play within that. But this is an Alabama team that's going to be a big challenge. I say that. South Florida, once again, man, this whole series, this home and home with Alabama and South Florida has been, it just messes with your mind here these last few years. But they were pushing them in the late in the 3rd quarter and into the 4th quarter. So it gives you some hope that maybe Wisconsin, if they get off to a hot start, that they can do some things. Wisconsin's got to find a way to get some shortcuts, right? They got to find a way to force some turnovers in this game, create short fields, get the crowd really into it early on during this matchup, and get Alabama behind the 8 ball. This is a Wisconsin offense that really hasn't been able to fire the ball down the field at all, right? This has been a fairly short passing game, which is not really what we expected from the Badgers. We thought having a guy with a gunslinger mentality, a big arm like Tyler Van Dyke, they would push the football down a little bit more. But maybe that's what they're holding back, right? That's maybe what Phil Longo is holding back as well. It's going to be a tremendous challenge right in this football game. You look at Alabama's offensive line, Wisconsin, man, their defensive line. Losing James Thompson Jr. was big up front, but I don't know how much of a difference, right, it would have made. This is a Wisconsin defensive front that has gotten pushed around at times versus Western Michigan and versus South Dakota. What do you think one of the top 10 offensive lines in the country is going to do to them, right? And you got a quarterback, and Ryan Williams on the outside is going to be able to make some plays. So it is going to be a tough challenge, but Luke Fickell said it in his press conference, we're going to find out where we are. And I think we're going to find out just where Wisconsin is. All of a sudden, if they push Alabama to a 1-possession game in the 4th quarter, then we're just throwing up our hands and like saying, we really don't know what Wisconsin is, right? If they put up a good effort. But to be honest with you, the inner Badger in me wants to say, yeah, they'll play a 1-possession game. They'll play them tight. I just don't see it happening. I think Alabama's roster is just way too deep, way too much more talented right now than the Wisconsin Badgers. And boy, this game has got me excited considering what has happened the last 2 weeks. Notre Dame at Purdue. I'm kicking myself for not picking the Boilermakers because I saw the early season schedule for these. Hey, Notre Dame going to Texas A&M. It's going to be a tough game. First week of the season. And Purdue, they play Indiana State, and then they have a bye, which means they can basically have their whole offseason and fall camp to prepare for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's obviously got to be invested into Texas A&M. And then Notre Dame has to play a 4th quarter game in which they lose to Northern Illinois. Notre Dame has put a ton on film. Purdue has put next to nothing on film. This is so intriguing to me because I think this game really comes down to Purdue's ability, Hudson Card's ability to throw the ball down the field. Notre Dame has a good secondary. That was the matchup I was unsure of in the preseason. But if this Purdue offense can really get going, I'm not a big Riley Leonard guy. I think my gut has proven to be correct on that. I wasn't a big Riley Leonard guy to start the season. I think this Notre Dame offense maybe having some issues, certainly having some issues, right? Not scoring more than 14, 15 points against a MAC team like Northern Illinois. I think this game is going to be very competitive. I do not see this game being more than 3 scores. I don't think Notre Dame is going to come in and just run them off the field. I think Ryan Walters is going to have his kids ready to play. This game is at Ross-Ade Stadium. You got to think everything that's kind of gone on these first couple of weeks of the season, the Ross-Ade Brigade is going to be ready for this game. It's going to be a raucous environment. Purdue is one of those environments in the Big Ten that can be very underrated in terms of a road environment. It's kind of that I love these mid-afternoon kicks where they start in the daytime. You get to the third quarter, maybe a little bit later on in the year. So it might not happen in this game, but the sun starts to set a little bit. It starts to get a little bit cooler. I just love the transition and how it looks out there. But this is going to be a really fun game. And then we got 2 rivalry games. Okay. Oregon State. We mentioned how Oregon has played so far this season. Beginning of the year, you're thinking, yeah, Oregon's gonna win by 40 against Idaho. They're gonna win by 30 against Boise State. And Oregon State, all of the changes within their program in college football, but I'm not so sure about that. They got to go on the road to Corvallis, and I'm going to say the same thing about the Apple Cup game, but I think it's more about this game. I feel it more about this specific game. These Pac-2 teams are angry about what happened to their conference, about what their rivals, right? Because it was the departure of Oregon and Washington at the very last minute when the Apple TV deal was on the table, when they left to the Big Ten, and then everything kind of collapsed from there. I think they're going to be very motivated to prove that they're just not a bunch of outcasts that are a group of 5 teams now. They're going to be ready for these specific football games. So watch out for that in this I think Oregon State is going to send the house. I think this is their Super Bowl. With that Mountain West schedule, this is their Super Bowl. Oregon has to be ready for the Beavers. You look at the other side in the Apple Cup, look at what Washington State did against Texas Tech. They put up 70 points on Portland State, just like Oregon did 1 year ago. Washington State has a slippery quarterback, a mobile quarterback back there that can certainly do some things. So Steve Belichick and the Huskies defense got to be able to contain the QB run game in this as well. That Washington State game, that spread is less than a touchdown right now in favor of the Huskies. All right. I think that's going to be a really good football game. Now it's at Lumen Field where the Seahawks play in Seattle. It's going to be a home field advantage for the Washington Huskies in this game, but I've been impressed to see what Washington has done against inferior opponents, Weber State and Eastern Michigan. I think that it's not going to be a complete measuring stick, right? Well, like maybe some Big Ten opponents, but I think we're going to really find out maybe just how good Washington is in this rivalry game. Huskies and Ducks need to be ready to play this weekend. If they're not focused, if they come out flat, the Beavs and the Cougs are going to be ready to pounce. Last one, I'll quickly talk about Indiana and UCLA. Boy, how will you talk about offense? How about that Indiana offense and what they did, over 700 yards of total offense last week? I don't care who you play. That's impressive. UCLA had a game they had a bye, and they didn't look very good in the game. This could be, I think, a big separator for Indiana to really keep on building that momentum. If UCLA falls, and they fall by a couple of scores coming off of a bye, I think the Bruins could be in a little bit of trouble, because we're going to find out Deshaun Foster as a head coach, Eric Bieniemy as a coordinator. We're going to find out how they can make adjustments on the fly throughout this season. That is going to be a tough test in defending Indiana's offense.
That's why you're the best in the world, Ted. Let the folks know what they can see on your YouTube channel right now.
Yeah, we got some good stuff coming up on Thursday. You know, we're kind of shifting to a Monday, Thursday format on the Big Nation side. And Thursdays going forward are going to be all about picks, and they're going to be all about previews, right? We're going to be talking every single one of those games. 5 previews: Alabama, Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Purdue, Civil War, Apple Cup, Indiana, UCLA. I'm going to have my straight up picks, going to have some betting stuff on there. So if you're a wagerer of stuff, so we'll have some stuff over there that's going to be fun as well. I know if you have some skin in the game, you know, you know, if you're an Illinois fan, you know, maybe watching Indiana and UCLA could make it a little bit more fun, right? So that's always fun to kind of know what to do over there. So that's what's coming up on Thursday, and then on Saturday, I'm really excited to kind of break down Alabama, Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Purdue, and I think the more time that goes by, I think the Civil War and the Apple Cup, those games have me really excited because of what Oregon has looked like, and then Washington State, what they've looked like so far. I think these games are a lot closer than I saw them before the season.
All right, Ted, I'm looking forward to discussing Illinois, Nebraska with you next week.
All right, sounds good.
And that's just going to wrap it up for this episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you all once again for joining us. Please, on your way out, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Helps us immensely, and appreciate all of you new followers on the podcast side. As I mentioned earlier, we've more than doubled the daily downloads just from 5 days ago. So thank you to the brand new audience. Please find me on Facebook, find me on Instagram, Locked On Illini. Send me a message, send me hello, like Mike did on Monday morning. Big action-packed week for you. I'll be bringing you content daily, as I do every single day, right here on this channel. ILL, love you guys.